said about looking into the future. The mayor asked that question and making a decision about what it is that you would do different than you had done before. I thought given the project to Caltrans might not be a bad solution. The traffic over there is moving, but it is moving slow, but it is moving. Danningberg is open, so that allows people an opportunity to get out of there. And no one is happy. The people that are going to the mall to shop, the people that are at the mall, the businesses, they're not happy with the fact that they would like a throng of people to come over and bam down their doors and give them the money, because this is the time when they need to make up for some things that they might have missed throughout the year. But these things happen. Caltrans is known for doing the kinds of things that they're doing, and I think Mr. Edney makes some good points about we need to have someone come here and explain to us. And I think Cheryl made another good point when she said that the lady is amenable to coming and sitting and talking with us in public, and I think that that's probably the way we need to do this. So I would certainly encourage us to do that, but I certainly want to thank you for the job up under these trying times that you have been put in to have to muddle through this water. So I think you're moving in the right direction with this. This is a learning moment, and so we need to take that and run with it. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Solomon. Ms. Sanders.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm curious as to when we ask the individual, the deputy director, to come, what is it that we want her to do? Do we want her just to come and say, well, the process is onerous and long, and yes, we apologize, or are we asking her to come and see whether or not we can have some idea of whether or not Caltrans will assist in picking up this additional cost? If it's for the latter, then I think that's what we may want to do. Otherwise, her presence to tell us she's very sorry about the delays isn't going to get us where we want to go. I think we might want to suggest a two-step approach. Have her come, maybe make an apology to our citizens, as well as let us know whether or not there is any funds that's available so that we could offset some of the costs that's going to be borne by the city.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. John, on when you talked about the process and having to redesign and submit to San Diego for approval, and sometimes it came back not approved and further modification, what triggered? Because we had a set of plans that were reviewed and approved by them, but something triggered those modifications. So are those things that should have been they were unexpected, or tell me why we had to go through those modifications?
Because the project has a long history. There's been multiple modifications. Can name many of them, but off the top of my head, when we were going through the design process, we went out and we shot topography for the site as required. We submitted the plans, we started the design, and Caltrans made us go back and change our benchmark system. So we had to go back through. That was one modification and delay.
But that wasn't triggered by.
No, it's just there's been numerous for this particular the latest delay that we had was due to we had an issue with our guardrail. It was 1.5 inches higher than what was spec'd during construction, and so Caltrans didn't want us to allow for construction with this guardrail being 1.5 inches too high, even though it was a construction site. The final product would have been within spec, but during construction, we just would have had this minor difference. And so that started this long evolution where we came up with staff and our construction manager came up with solutions to try and keep the project moving forward with the guardrail up too high. And in the end, they basically started looking at the turning movements on the bridge And so we had to go back through and do a redesign of our K-rail on the bridge. So these were items that they had already approved.
It sounds
So
unreasonable to me
so-
for Caltrans to change those.
So, I mean,
If it was something that was triggered because something that was unexpected, that something was underground, or something that could reasonably be expected to surface, but this sounds like almost like they changed their mind.
well, I think, from Caltrans' perspective, they're being very conservative, and they won't budge from what their particular standard is, and that can be difficult when the standards conflict in their own document, and that's essentially what we had with this issue with the guardrail, and so they were trying to hold us to two standards at the same time, and it caused a delay.
Mr. Gay, please put in your discussion about the guardrail. This is a temporary.
It was
guardrail.
This
is a K-rail used for construction purposes.
Yeah, the guardrail that was an issue was a permanent guardrail, but it was going to be it was temporary in the sense that it was going to be 1.5 inches too high for 5 or 6 weeks.
Well, again, in the spirit of cooperation, I think we need to alert Caltrans as to our core issues in a letter
we
to
will do that.
allow for an appropriate response.
And as part of that letter is to the District 11 Director is requesting that she meet with members of the council and eventually with the full council. Meet with the mayor, let's start with that, and have the discussion. And so we would like to have you in this open meeting. Clearly, it's the process. We offered some very good solutions on this rail issue, and that held us up weeks waiting for that. And local Caltrans folks thought that it might work. So there was a level of cooperation. But when it came up to San Diego, it said, nope. And the word was, we will not ramp. And it's called ramping, where you have 2 levels of asphalt. We were proposing to put down temporary asphalt to meet the requirement and rip it up to make this work, to get the schedule going. And it came back, 3 weeks later? No.
Yeah, what we're trying to avoid is doing work out there and ripping it out. And the solution that was provided by Caltrans, the initial solution was to go ahead and lay. We're putting down a very expensive mix. It's a high stability mix. To lay that mix down and then remove a part of it and to lay it down again. And so it didn't make sense to us to do that. So,
Mr. Gay, when you answer Ms. Walker's question about hindsight and doing things differently, you mentioned that the decision to not include in the agreement a construction management piece for Caltrans. Do other entities do that, or Caltrans, for as far as I've been in government, has always been viewed as the immovable monster that you can't move. And I don't know whether we can succeed, but
I think that we have a legal agreement with Caltrans, a co-op agreement, and I think that within that context, it allows us flexibility to state what our terms are. And if our terms are to fund, and they have just financial co-ops, then that allows us to just fund up to a certain point and allow Caltrans to proceed. And so it's going to, obviously it depends upon the project, it depends upon the developer, it depends upon what's best for the city. It may be, who knows what happens in 5 years, it may be best that we partner again, but I think looking in hindsight, we definitely don't want to go through this process again. And so it just depends upon the opportunity. But from in the short term, and we're already doing this, by the way, in the short term, specifically for the future improvement at Dogwood and I-8, which will be the widening of that facility to a 6-lane facility, we're just funding Caltrans. We took the development impact fees that came from the Ivy Plaza and from the Ivy Commons, and we transfer them over to Caltrans, and they're moving they're going through an environmental phase and a design phase right now to get that up to 35% design. So we already have co-ops like that in place. I think that's something where we can move forward if there's a project in the future that necessitates some type of mitigation on their route.
And on your staff report, in the fiscal impact piece, you say that the final fiscal impact of this are not known at this time. That's what the report says. When will we know?
I've talked to the city manager about doing, and I'm actually meeting with the contractor tomorrow. I anticipate having answers for some of the questions based upon the previous memo tomorrow. I think it will help council if I just update our cost every couple of weeks and timelines, and so that's what I'll do. It's easy enough for me to do. We have a construction manager that's providing those reports, so I can go ahead and compile that information in a short memo to you, just so you know what's going on. That's what I can do.
Thank you, Mr. Kay. Any additional comments from the council? Are we ready for a resolution 10?
115.
10 what?
115.
115. Resolution of the City Council of the City of El Centro approving a First Amendment to the cooperative agreement with the State of California, acting by and through its Department of Transportation relating to an encroachment permit to install traffic signals on the ramps located at Dogwood and Interstate 8. And I believe that the council's direction is also to send a letter to Caltrans requesting for answers, perhaps a meeting, an invitation to the council, to the deputy director out of our region. Does that capture council's? Okay, is there a motion for that? Motion by Ms. Walker, second by Mr. Solomon. Please ballot.
Motion carried 5-0.
Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 5, which is the an interim proposal for an interim ordinance of the City Council of the City of El Centro, California, imposing a temporary moratorium on the establishment of medical marijuana and production houses in the City of El Centro and declaring the urgency thereof. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and let staff make its presentation. Then we'll hear from the public. There are a number of you who did not indicate on your slip if you were in favor or against the recommendation. And I don't know if people really understood when you said in favor or not. So I'll talk about that to make sure that we get your clear position on this issue, and then I'll bring it back to council. Okay, so Ms. Icaña.
Thank you very much. Honorable Mayor and members of the council, this item is being brought back as per your direction. And just a little bit of the background, this discussion on this item started back in April 21 of this year. At that time, council took the action and adopted a 45-day moratorium to allow staff to research the issue and come back with follow-up recommendations. Following that, on June 2nd, the moratorium was extended to October 3rd based on the fact that there were several pending legal cases that were still out there. So there was a moratorium. The moratorium was extended to September 21st, to October 3rd. And finally, on September 21st, the moratorium was extended to today, and the direction provided by council was to come back with options or recommendations as to how we can handle this matter, this issue within the City of El Centro. As you are aware, the City of El Centro Municipal Code does not contain any provisions expressly permitting or prohibiting the operation of medical marijuana dispensaries. This is something new for the city, as it has been for many of the cities who are dealing with this issue in California. I'm not going to go into all the legal aspects. It's in your staff report. However, I just wanted to go over some of the options that staff has come up with. During the period of the moratorium, staff has done extensive research, has consulted with different cities as to how each city is handling this matter. So these are based on our research, consultations, and so forth. These are what we are recommending, the options that we are recommending. Basically, we have three options being provided to you. The first one would be to outright prohibit the establishment of medical marijuana dispensaries in the city. What that would do is basically we would, staff will prepare a text amendment to the zoning ordinance and would come back to you for final approval. And I'm anticipating that this process will take about 4 months. The second option would be to give direction to staff to review and consider options for the regulation of medical marijuana dispensaries in the city. What this would require is for staff to go back and start drafting an ordinance that would include the standards and regulations for the establishment of these facilities. We're anticipating that depending on what direction we get from council, this option will take between 6 to 9 months. And the last option is to continue extending the moratorium and to basically to await the outcome of the pending cases.
Thank you, Ms. Vicaña. I think for the benefit of the audience, I'm going to restate basically what Ms. Vicaña has said is that the council can say no. We're not going to allow them in the city of El Centro. That will require us to go back and amend our zoning ordinance to specifically prohibit that. And in the meantime, I presume that there will be a moratorium prohibiting any applications. Option number 2 is where the council, if the council was inclined to say yes, we're going to allow dispensaries in the city of El Centro, the staff will need some time to come back and provide the council with standards, regulations, provisions that would be established for the allowance of the dispensaries. And that will take some time to do. And we can talk, if the council is inclined to go in that direction, we can give staff some recommendations to help for staff to understand what the council's direction will be. And option number 3 is to say, we're not sure yet, we're going to hold on and see what pending court cases will lead us on, or will be give us additional information. Is that basically it, Norma?
That's it.
Okay, I have a number of slips, and the first set does not say if people are opposed, does not give a position on the matter, and it doesn't say if you wish to come over and speak. So if you do, come on over. If not, just if you state your position very quickly. Sergio Mendeville, are you here? Henry John, I can't make out the last name. Did you want to speak, sir? Yeah, please. Okay, please. David James, did you wish to speak or just just want to speak? Okay. Bryce, wish to speak?
If there are additional blue slips, they bring them right over here, and we'll take care of those.
Okay. Kathleen? Yes. Okay. All right. Okay, thank you.
I traveled far and wide to get here today, literally thousands of miles. Let me explain that. I was literally dying in Cleveland, Ohio, wasting away from AIDS, complications. My weight plummeted from 189 pounds to 114 pounds. And what helped me regain my weight was smoking marijuana. It wasn't legal in Ohio. So I decided to move for a variety of reasons, but the deciding factor in coming to California was medicinal marijuana. I've since spoken to a number of people and have learned of other ways to use it other than smoking. I use a tincture, which is not only reduces the severity and the duration of my neuropathy, which is a direct result of the AIDS that I have, it decreases the duration. The same is true with my phantom limb pain. I'm an amputee and have been for 34 years. That's not as severe, it's not as often, and it's not as intense. 6 months ago, I was on 13 prescriptions. Today, I take 6. I take 2 antivirals to fight the HIV. I was on 4 psychiatric medications. I'm down to 2. I no longer take one psych medication that made me literally grasp the walls when I awoke in the morning. I no longer have to take Neurontin, which had the same effect for the neuropathy. Have you ever woken up at 4 o'clock in the morning and turned your lights on because you thought your foot and hands were on fire? That has happened to me dozens and dozens of times. It doesn't happen anymore. Marijuana has saved my life. It has improved the quality of living. But what's disheartening is at this point I have to travel more than an hour to get my medicine. It's not yet covered by insurance companies, but I anticipate a day that it will. But in the meantime, the right thing to do, the proper thing to do, the moral thing to do is to stop interfering with the will of the people of this great state when they legalized medicinal marijuana. That's been over 10 years ago. And it boggles my mind. I find it astounding that cities throughout the state still haven't adopted rules to regulate and operate dispensaries. It's time to get on the ball.
Thank
Please do the right thing.
Thank you, Mr. Henry.
Thank you.
Okay, David James, if you please come to the podium, and also if Bryce, I think it's Abernathan, get me ready after following Mr. James. And I forgot to ask Mr. Henry, but if the speakers can also indicate your name and address for the record, please.
Good evening, City Council members, Mayor. My name is David James. Can you hear me on this?
Yeah, now we can.
Okay. And I come down here from Huntington Beach to support the ASA members, the medical marijuana members in your community, and have a lot of confusion on medical marijuana. A lot of it contributed to by press reports on things, but one issue that continually is we're faced with is this: it's going to damage the children. It's going to harm the children. It's going to endanger the children. Unfortunately, or fortunately for us, fortunately for the community, it's not the way it's happening. It's not the people who have a dispensary don't buy from a dealer out in the street. The dealer out in the street doesn't check IDs. He doesn't care about IDs. You got the cash, you got the grass, or whatever else he's happened to be selling. Another issue is the extra crime activity around the dispensaries. That's a common mantra among cities. Hey, it's going to up this crime. It's going to up the crime. It's going to up the crime. Chief Charlie Beck, Los Angeles Chief of Police. But okay, I'm going to nail these medical marijuana people on this. I'm going to do a study. And so he did a study of, let's see, 350 banks in the city of Los Angeles compared to about 500 medical marijuana dispensaries. And just one issue, robberies. Out of the 350 banks, there were 87 robberies. Out of the over 500 dispensaries, there were 37. So it doesn't hold up on that either. I mean, there's no real logical reason for continuing the prohibition of medical marijuana dispensaries. I wish we could get someone in here tonight who operates a medical marijuana dispensary. If you could just get somebody in, or who's wanting to operate one in El Centro, get someone in to sit down to talk, okay, what else besides providing medical marijuana do you want to do in this dispensary? I think you'll be amazed. You really, truly would be amazed at all the wonderful community services that the medical marijuana dispensaries do provide for residents and patients in the area. I know just people with a food bank. I've seen numerous dispensaries with food banks in them, people with taking care of the children. I know of one gentleman in one dispensary I was active in. He's a quadriplegic. He has a house in Orange, California. He couldn't do lawn work. Okay, I went over several weekends, and I did his lawn work. But these are the kind of spirit, this is the kind of drive that these people have for for helping the community, not just selling marijuana. And I really hope that you give a chance to one of the people who is actually looking at establishing this. Sit down and talk with them. What else do you want to do with this center?
Thank you, Mr. James.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. James. We have a lot of people that wish to speak on this. I'm going to ask you we actually want to give everyone an opportunity to speak to the council, but if the message has been stated before, if you can shorten it so we can get through this item in a way that's fair but also expeditious. So, Mr. James, thank you. Mr. Abernathan? And if I can have, please, Kathleen Rami, be ready following Mr. Bryce.
And so I give you my address?
Yes,
so
please.
I drove all the way from Nuevo to tell
Please.
you guys that cannabis patients need safe access to their medicine of choice, and it's wrong to make hardworking men and women into criminals and convicts for trying to take care of their ailments. And because safe access is extremely important, and it rests on your shoulders to provide patients with what they need. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Miss Kathleen? And if I can have Martha James. Martha, do you wish to speak to the council? Yes. Okay. If you can make yourself down to the microphone would help, please. Miss Samjar, how do you pronounce your last name?
Zama Jerome.
Okay, I won't even try to say that.
They usually call me Kathy Z.
Okay.
I am a retired nurse. I nursed for well over 35 years. Had to retire at the age of 51 because of severe osteoarthritis. Modern medicine was able to give me my life. In 2003, I was told I had 6 months to live. I was in kidney and liver failure and congestive heart failure, a lot of it because of reactions to medications. I was able to survive that with the help of modern medicine, but it left me dependent because of multiple joint replacements, as well as fractures and ruptured vertebrae in my back. And it was not until I was able to use the medication in tincture and edibles that I was able to get up and be able to walk and be here today. I have been out of my chair for a year now, but it is a hardship to go a long distance to receive your medication. I have met several of the people that I took care of in this getting this therapy, and it has improved their life. I work with an AIDS group as well as other patients to help them understand that they can use this therapy with other therapies, whether it be heat therapy, exercise, water therapy. But we need to have access to this therapy. The people that are, I just turned 60. but people, after you've worked hard and long and you have arthritis, you have broken backs, you have whatever you have, you need to be able to use the therapy that helps. God bless you. I hope that you stand for the civil right of your people to have access.
Thank you.
God
Thank you.
bless you.
Thank you, ma'am. Ms. Marla James.
Yes.
There's no address here. If you can please state your name. And but before we do that, Jeff Jonatis, do you wish to speak? Yes, sir. Please, can you make yourself down so that we can be ready for you? Yes, Ms. James.
You should all have gotten a copy of this. It has my address on it.
We need that for the recording.
For the record.
Okay, I am, my address is 4901 Heil Avenue, apartment B15, Huntington Beach, California, 92649.
Thank you, Ms. James.
My name is Marla James, Honorable Mayor and City Council and staff. I am the president of the Orange County Americans for Safe Access, and I've come here to hopefully help you answer questions for you regarding medical marijuana dispensaries, anything that you have any doubts about. I do want to mention that cannabis dispensaries are legal under state law in California. Of course, you know about Proposition 215, which was passed in 1996. And a couple of years later, we had Bill 420, which is the Medical Marijuana Program Act. And with those two bills, it makes it legal collectively or cooperatively to cultivate and distribute cannabis for medical purposes. It's under California Health and Safety Code, Section 11362.775. The Act also exempts collectives and cooperatives from criminal sanctions associated with the sales of maintaining a place where sales occur. In 2005, California's 3rd District Court of Appeal affirmed the legality of collectives and cooperatives in a landmark case, People versus Urzicinu, which held that medical marijuana MMP provides collectives and cooperatives a defense to marijuana distribution charges. Another landmark decision from the 3rd District of Appeal in the case of County of Butte versus Superior Court not only affirmed the legality of collectives, but also found that the collective members could contribute financially without having to directly participate in cultivation. Again, that's something I know quite well because in a wheelchair, I can't cultivate. I cannot grow for myself. I live in an apartment. My apartment's small. I don't have room for plants. I can't, and I can't tend to a plant being in a wheelchair. Also yesterday, a case from the 4th District, Quality Patients versus Anaheim, affirmed that that state law trumps federal law. So if you had any questions about, well, it's not legal federally, we don't want anybody here who is breaking the law federally, state, or local issues. Well, that was affirmed yesterday by the California Supreme Court, saying that, or the 4th District, and it said that, again, the state trumps federal law, and that's really important to understand. Also, in 2008, the State Attorney General, Jerry Brown, issued guidelines. Your police department should have copies of this guideline, or if you need copies of the guideline, contact me and I will get you copies of the guideline. And this basically shows what a city can do. Now, as a city, you can benefit from ordinances. And ordinances are not as hard as you might think because it's something that's already been done. City of Sebastopol is about the same population of City of El Centro. Also, Palm Springs has a really good ordinance. What you're allowed to do as a city when it comes to ordinances is you can limit the number of medical marijuana dispensaries. You can also limit the area. If it was an R2 or R1 or commercial area, you can limit them, by setting up areas that they can do business in. And thirdly, you can limit the hours of operation. So you don't want them open past 8, 9 o'clock at night. That's your call. They also, as far as crime and everything concerned, all of the medical marijuana dispensaries that I deal with, and there's many in Orange County.
We have a lot of speakers. Can you conclude your comments in the next 30 seconds, if you don't mind, please?
I can by saying, if you have questions, or I am willing to help you with your ordinances. It's been done. We can help you. Contact me, and I would be happy to. I'll come down from Orange County, and I will sit with your staff, and we can go over ordinances, and it shouldn't be difficult to do because it's been done.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Jameson. Perhaps the council might have questions for you later.
Okay.
I'm not sure. Thank you. Again, I'm going to ask the speakers if the point that you're making has been stated before, if you don't mind just stating that so we don't repeat testimony. Mr. Jonitis, and then Katrina Coleman. Are you wishing to speak to the council? Yes. Okay, if you can make yourself down, please. And if your name for the address for the record, please.
Yes, sir. Name is Jeff Jonitis. Address is 2111 Beechwood Avenue, Fullerton, California, 92835. Good evening to the council. I'm also a medical cannabis patient. I have been for 5 years. I came here tonight to just personalize myself and put a face or a stamp on who is a medical patient. I'm hoping somebody in our group will address revenue, which is something that seems to be a concern of the city with the lack of accountability or the fact that there's been people that have been behind the ball with construction. This could be something that the city could use as far as generating revenue. There's currently 9 cities in the state of California that have implemented a tax, I believe, somewhere between 3% and 15% on the sale of cannabis. Also, I think the city needs to focus more on education. First, the word marijuana actually has a negative connotation to the Mexican Americans that first came to this country, and that was implemented by the government. The actual proper term would be cannabis for the medicine. That's something I just wanted to state for the city council, and something you may want to consider when addressing the ordinance. But I think education is a very important thing before you even talk about ordinances, because clearly it seems that there's still confusion on whether or not this does have a medicinal purpose, and it clearly does. I've worked with over 100 patients with variety of illnesses and diseases, from MS, cancer, AIDS. I have 7 years of banking experience, and I chose to leave that industry to pursue this industry because I felt like this was something moral and ethical, and what I thought banking wasn't quite what it was when I was on the inside. And so I would implore the council to continue to educate and find out about its medicinal properties, because it does have a place in the city of El Centro, and I think your demographics here in the city would definitely accommodate it, and it would be great for the city. It could provide revenue for transportation and things that the city desperately needs. Thank you for your time, council. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Katrina Coleman, before I do that, Leo Lawrence, are you wishing to speak? Yes, Ms. Coleman. Can you give your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Katrina Coleman. I am from Murrieta, California. I am here today to ask that your city take a look at Measure Z. Oakland had passed Measure Z in November 2004 with 65% of the vote. Last year, they got over $1 million in tax revenue from their medical cannabis. Measure Z outlines a lot of things that it looks like you need to address, like where your money could go, reducing crime, improving law enforcement, raising city revenue. I heard you're having some issues with your streets and stuff. You'd have a lot of money to use for all of the things that your city needs. The main thing that you need to understand, or that I would like you to consider, is that Americans deserve safe access to their medicine, no matter what anyone thinks. It's just absolutely imperative that Americans get safe access to their medicine. I represent an organization called the Human Solution, and we are here, as well as other organizations like ASA and Normal, to provide you with all kinds of information if you ever wanted it or needed it. I hope that you would reach out to organizations that have a lot of experience, especially cities like Oakland that, like I said, last year collected over $1 million in taxes. So you might want to consider that and look into that.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Cohen. Mr. Lawrence, before we do that, Lenny Swendlin? Lenny, are you wishing to speak? Yes, you are? Okay. Mr. Lawrence?
Feliz Navidad, todos.
Feliz Navidad. Can you say your name for your address for the record?
Leo Lawrence. Last name is spelled with a U. Laurence, 3907 Georgia Street, Condo 15, San Diego 92103.
Thank you, sir.
And I'd like to suggest that we remember Pearl Harbor. My remarks tonight come from deep inside of law enforcement. I'm here representing Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, which is an international organization of current and former law enforcement officers, prosecutors, judges, and one two-term Republican governor. Mr. Mayor, I'm a little confused as to what the specific question before you. Is there a specific recommendation? You have three alternatives up here, but what is the recommendation? I'm not sure.
I think the staff has given us three options, which after the public testimony, the council will discuss that and make a selection among those three.
All right. Law Enforcement Against Prohibition then would urge the council to extend the moratorium and make it permanent. I completed 4 years of postdoctoral studies in appellate law at the Court of Appeal in San Diego and worked on a case in which the issue was whether or not a local jurisdiction like this city council could have an ordinance that would thwart a state law. And the court, of course, ruled that local communities do not have jurisdiction to do something that thwarts the operation or implementation of a state law. So to avoid that conflict, you are urged to have a permanent moratorium. And very fast, marijuana doesn't cause consumers to be violent, and this comes from law enforcement. It doesn't have long-term toxic effects. It's not physically addictive, and is not a gateway drug. You are specifically urged to avoid the so-called Palm Springs resolution. There are some material and information in there that we would challenge the accuracy of. So we urge you to look at that very carefully. Are there any questions that I can answer?
Can you shed some light into what specifically about the Palm Springs resolution do you find conflicting? What specifically about the Palm Springs ordinance do you find troubling or conflicting?
Specifically, they were referring to something that they called adverse secondary effects, as if crime goes up wherever there's a medical marijuana dispensary. That is factually not true. Coming from deep inside law enforcement, it's much easier to take down a person who has been consuming marijuana than a drunk, and much more dangerous to the law enforcement officer. Medical marijuana, though, is law. It's not something like Prop 19 was referring to legalization. Actually, it wasn't. Legalization would have let somebody light up in here. 19 didn't do that. But this council has an obligation to do what is necessary to implement the provisions of the medical marijuana law that is state law.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Perhaps the council might have questions for you when we,
Yes,
when we
Mr.
deliberate.
Council, I had passed my bio around, so do you have any questions?
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence. Perhaps the council might later.
Thank you.
Thank you. Lenny and Jennifer Robertson. You're not speaking? Okay. We'll register your opposition or position later. Jeremy Robertson. He's not speaking. Benjamin Pilgrim. Okay. Okay. We'll. Okay. Sara Ambris. Are you speaking? You are? Okay. Can you come make yourself down to the podium? Okay, Mr. Swindlin?
Swordlow. My name's Lanny Swordlow. I'm a registered nurse. I'm director of the Marijuana Anti-Prohibition Project, which is a medical marijuana patient support group and law reform organization. We have monthly meetings in the city of Palm Springs, in Yucca Valley, Landers, up in Victorville and Riverside, and we have a meeting here in El Centro on the third Thursday of every month at 7:30 p.m. at the Imperial Valley Collective at 119 North Fifth Avenue.
Can you say your address for the record, please? I'm sorry.
My home, the address is 647 Main Street, Riverside, space 1.
Thank you.
1B. You know, it's interesting coming here and talking because this is an issue that, you know, it's gained a lot of attention. And look who's here at this meeting. The town people, most of them don't want to talk, but it's mainly young people. Where are the older people? Well, you know, they're interested in this issue too, but maybe they're a little scared. You know, they've lived here longer. They're not as bold and as open as young people are. A little more conservative. Don't want to show their face. And you know, you've given them every reason why they shouldn't. Because I'm talking about Joanne Villaria. She operated a medical marijuana collective here. She was a cancer patient. She found out cannabis helped treat all the ailments and symptoms of that disease. And she had to travel to San Diego, deal with criminals. She didn't want to do that. She said, hey, let's open up a collective. It's allowed under state law. She got a lawyer to write up all the papers for her. She did everything right. She even got a seller's permit, so she'd pay sales taxes. You know, you pay sales tax on marijuana. Board of Equalization said you do that. They don't tell you to pay sales taxes on something that's illegal. What Joanne Villaria was doing was legal. And yet your police department raided her and eventually arrested her and put her in jail with, what, $20,000 bail? She's like a criminal? That's what happens when you don't have an ordinance. Your police treat these people like criminals for doing something that is perfectly legal under state law. Did you ever give your police any direction on how to handle a medical marijuana collective? Is this what you wanted to have happen? Joanne, where are you? Stand up. Joanne, stand up. Look at her. Is this what you wanted put in prison with $20,000 bails for doing something that's permitted under state law? That's what happens when you don't take action, when you don't know what needs to be done to bring you into compliance with state law. And that's what you need to do. You need to come into compliance with state law. And Marla was talking about this new thing where the California Supreme Court rejected the appeal by the city of Anaheim in that court case about the federal thing. Well, it also had to do with the fact that there's another thing called the Cruz decision, which said, you know, it was a temporary moratorium. The case that doesn't apply, that's banned. So if you pass a ban, which is what you want to do, if you do number one, you're going to be telling your staff to draft a ban. That's not legal. That's not legal. So here's what you need to do. Here's what you need to do. You need to extend your moratorium for 6 months. 6 months. And you do number 2. You immediately direct your staff to review and consider options for the regulation of medical marijuana collectors. And what you do is you do what they did in Palm Springs. The Palm Springs ordinance is not perfect, but it's certainly a good starting point. I worked on that. I was on the Palm Springs Medical Marijuana Task Force for about a year. And what that task force did, remember, you don't have to invent the wheel. They did. This was really new when they were doing this. But every month that task force met, and the planning department person who was in charge of drafting that ordinance would come to that meeting every time and tell them what they have done, and then get input from that commission, from that task force, and then go back and mold it again, and then come on back. And after about 6 or 7 months, they had an ordinance in place that when it went before the city council, there wasn't a dog and cat fight over it, because the patients and the city were in agreement on how to operate medical marijuana collectors effectively. And that's what you need here to do. And please consider that. 6 month moratorium, which could be extended, they need a little more time, and option number 2. And seriously, tell your staff we want to see a committee organized within 30 days of that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Fandon. Sarah Ambris, Stefan Lobstein, are you wishing to speak? No, okay. Second, please. Diane Regan, are you wishing to speak? Yes. Okay. Ms. Ambris.
Hi, my name is Sarah Ambris. My address is 1517 8th Street in Brawley. And I was a cancer person. And I'm also depression, stress, bipolar, ADD, and anxiety attacks, so many things that they had me in so many medications. I had like 10 medications. 10 medications would have me sedated, and I couldn't enjoy my life. I couldn't enjoy my children. I couldn't do my regular daily duties. But when I came to marijuana, it helped me. I only take 2 pills out of all those 10. It helped me so much more better. I could enjoy my children and do my daily life without being sedated with the medication that my doctor was giving me. So I just wanted you to hear my side of the story, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Ambris. Diane Reagan and William Learned, you here? Are you wishing to speak? No? And Sergio Mendeville, you here? He's outside. Ms. Reagan.
Well, congratulations, Mayor Silva.
Thank you.
And I wanted to talk a little bit. I think Mr. Swerdlow talked about what happened to Ms. Villarreal, and the DA is still going after her. They're going through pretrial motions, things like that, charging her with possession for sale of marijuana, as if she just decided one day to open a store and sell marijuana. Like, why didn't someone think of that years ago? No drug dealer is going to open a store and sell marijuana. She did everything under the law. And the really horrible thing was, at the time that the place was raided, she was not arrested. She was arrested on her way to the city council meeting, one of the city council meetings, the only one where she was not here. The police came right as she was walking out the door, walked her back in, searched the place illegally without a search warrant, searched her personal things, re-arrested her, and were joking and laughing and kept her there until the city council meeting was over. Oh, city council meeting is probably over. You're not going to go speak to them. So, that is our police force here in El Centro trying not only to, put her in jail for something that she's doing that's perfectly legal under the state law of California. And I don't know, last time they checked, I think who raided her was a state organization. She's being prosecuted in state court. The feds won't touch these things right now. It's ridiculous that she had to go through that she's still having to go through it. The bad thing is, the public defenders aren't very familiar. They don't have many cases like this. The DAs aren't very familiar. They're all doing research. But in the middle of it, she's on bail, and she's in the middle of a criminal prosecution for doing something where she dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, and everything was fine. And I just think the most outrageous thing was how they came just to silence her, to make it so she could not have a voice, with the city council that day. And I mean, there are other people who are witnesses, we're not making this up, but that just made me so angry. And I forgot to mention at the last meeting, that the police would do that. And they had a pizza party, actually. A pizza, they didn't give her any, but, until the council meeting was over. And then they let her go. Or no, they let there was another guy there who was going to come to the meeting and let him go. But what else I wanted to notice was, at the last meeting that I came to, the council sort of wanted to see, why is there no opposition to this? Well, I think, the people who want to come, the voice of the people are the people who are here. Everybody knows when a city council meeting is, isn't it? Well, in the paper, or I don't know, but I think if there were a lot of opposition to it, the people would be here. And I'm not sure, if we're going to have any tonight, but I know that so far there has not been any opposition. And I think as, of the voice of the people are the people who are here arguing, and trying to get safe access to the medication that they need. So I just ask that you take that into consideration. I know there have been other city councils and other places that have, not just drummed up opposition, and then they came to the meeting, but that's good that it hasn't happened here. But I just, ask that you think about that. And the people that you represent are the people of El Centro. And I know you have to think about, the other people that aren't here. But the people who do have a strong opposition are invited to come, just as the people who are in favor of opening, a collective and having, safe access to medical marijuana. So, thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Reagan. Okay. For the names that I called that did not wish to speak, my presumption is that you are in favor of the city lifting the moratorium, correct? Or was anybody of the names that I listed wanting to support the moratorium to stay? No? Okay, for the record. Okay, we're going to conclude public comments, and I'm going to bring it back to council for question, comments, statements. Who wants to go first? No? Okay. Ms. Sanders?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have some questions for the city attorney. It's been raised by some of the passionate speakers here tonight that state law trumps federal law on this issue. Would you provide us a clarification, Mr. Hernandez, please?
Well, as I recall, the issue in the city of Anaheim case is whether or not federal law superseded state law with regard to the fact that federal law prohibits the sale, possession, or distribution of marijuana. And I haven't read the court decision, but as I recall, under certain circumstances, the state courts have held, notwithstanding federal law, that state officers are to follow state law. So that was the question: as a state officer or a city, do you follow state or federal law? With regard to that issue, where state law says it's legal to possess a certain amount, and federal law says it's illegal. In terms of state prosecution, state law would govern, obviously. If the federal government decided to prosecute under federal law would govern that. So with regard to dispensaries or to the possession of and use of medical marijuana, the courts are saying that it's legal in California under state law to do so. So you're not prohibited by federal law to allow them to operate, if you choose.
Okay, however, if there was a case of certain amount, then the federal law may come in and decide that that would be something worth prosecuting. Am I hearing these dual?
Yeah, well, we have two different court systems. You have the state law for prosecution of state law violations, and you have federal courts for prosecution of federal laws. So the federal government is not subject to state law, so obviously they're going to follow the federal law, and they decide, at what levels they want to prosecute people for violating federal law. So that's really not a state decision; that's the federal government decision.
Okay. Then I have some other additional questions.
Can I follow up related to on that theme, Mr. Hernandez? That there's been an observation made by one of the speakers that we are under obligation to follow state law and allow the dispensaries, when in fact there's been a number of cities locally, I think Brawley, Calexico, Imperial, their city councils, Hopeville, adopted an ordinance prohibiting dispensaries within their jurisdiction. And I believe that there's a court case that had made it to the Supreme Court, but that was sent back to the local court. So where we are in terms of local jurisdiction.
Well, that issue is open. Nobody knows the answer to that question because the Supreme Court has not ruled on it, nor I don't believe a Court of Appeals has ruled on that issue, that particular issue. Court of Appeals has said that cities do have the right and the obligation or duties anyway to regulate land use with regard to medical marijuana dispensaries. So you can determine location, hours of operation, or any other condition you might want to impose on them. So the city has that right as under its police power to regulate them. You're not obligated. Are you obligated to allow them anywhere in the city? That's the question that the courts will need to address. The proposition that enacted the allowance of medical marijuana didn't address that issue. So that really is an open question in my mind on whether or not total prohibition is legal or not. I think that's subject to debate, and obviously the courts will decide at some point.
Thank you, Mr. Sanders. Ms. Sanders?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to continue this line of my train of thought, if I may. The follow-up, whether it's a question for staff or perhaps some member of the audience, regarding whether or not we should have a cannabis dispensary within the city, whatever the land use may be. No one raised, at least to my satisfaction, who would cultivate and how would it be cultivated, and then how will that cultivation actually be monitored? That's one. Number two, if someone, and perhaps the young lady that did have a dispensary might wish to respond to that question. Number two, I don't think that any of us, at least yours truly, have any questions regarding the municipal effects. Is this Lenny? Are you yes. Lenny, sir? But before you come forward, Lenny, I think I would prefer to hear from the young lady that actually had the dispensary. I know that you...
I'm on the board of directors and the founder of the Inland Empire Patients Health and Wellness Center. It is a collective in the city of Riverside.
You wouldn't mind standing down so that
okay.
she could come forward and answer that, and then following her response, we'll be happy to hear from you, if I may, Mr. Mayor. Thank you so much, Lenny.
Can you state your name and address for the record, please?
My name is Joanne Villarreal. I'm the director and member of Imperial Valley Collective. I am at 119 South 5th Street Hill in El Centro, California. So can you address your question to me again, please?
Yes, I will do that. The question was about the cultivation of the cannabis to be dispensed. Is that something that you have done in the past? And how is it cultivated? Would you be doing it on site? And then what is, well, I'm thinking as a person who come from a healthcare background, we normally have individuals who say, yes, we can do this, and it's in a cultured format, and then we make sure there's a certain amount of testing that's performed so that when we do dispense, it is done in the safe manner for the particular recipient of the medication, if you will.
Well, we would like to cultivate on site. If we had gotten our ordinance that we'd cultivate it on site and have our fellow members participate in the cultivation of the medical cannabis. That's part of being a collective. We try to get all our fellow members in there to participate in the cultivation. We have members that aren't able to grow, they're in wheelchairs and they have certain things where they're not able to grow their cannabis.
Right. Then what I'm looking for in addition to that is what measure of quality control do you have for the...
All of our medicinal marijuana comes from fellow cooperative members, collective members. We don't... we cultivate fellow members. We cultivate our own medical marijuana. We do not get any of our medicines from street vendors or criminals. We get it from fellow members, members of our collective. If we're able to, we'd like to, cultivate it ourselves and provide our own little facility there where our patients can get involved, and in the whole process right there.
Okay. Well then, Mr. Mayor, if I may, now Lenny believes he's going to add some nice new dimensions for this. Thank you so much.
Mr. Swindon?
I think everybody should give Joanne a hand for what she's been going through. Brave lady, and she's still here talking to you. She's not home cowering.
I beg your pardon?
She's not home cowering. She's not afraid. She hasn't been beaten down. You know, when you're put in jail and prosecuted and all that kind of stuff, it's pretty demoralizing and kind of debilitating and kind of humiliating. But it hasn't gotten Joanne down. She's here today.
But
She's
you're
working
here
on this.
you're standing before us now, sir, to respond, and you said
Right,
you were
now,
going to add something
yes.
based upon your
I
level of
am board of
expertise
directors.
and
I'm
knowledge.
the founding member, founder, and the board of directors member of the Inland Empire Patients Health and Wellness Center. It is a medical marijuana collective that I would like to put forth as a model medical marijuana collective that I'd like to see other medical marijuana collectives do, because it is totally compliant with the Attorney General guidelines. The Attorney General guidelines call for a collective to just facilitate the exchange of marijuana between its members. Collective has to be a closed entity. Only members of that collective can grow that marijuana, and only members of that collective can receive that marijuana. It has to be done that way. What we have operating there is a farmer's market. A farmer's market. You come to the collective and you go into the back room. When you're a member, if you're growing marijuana and you have excess marijuana available, you can bring it down to the collective at the farmer's market. Other members will come down there and you can sell to them. Help recoup your cost. You know, growing marijuana is not cheap, especially if you're growing indoors with lights and utilities. It's very time consuming, very expensive to grow. That's one of the reasons it's so outrageously priced. But this is, and all that collective does is it facilitates those members who grow in giving marijuana to other members to grow. It's a wonderful way, and that's the way most collectives operate. Now, the other question I wanted to address is the one about I'm a registered nurse. I wanted to address this thing about the research and why it's not handled like other drugs at your pharmacies and this kind of stuff.
Please do so.
Yes, this is a very sad, sad situation. For years, we have been trying to get the studies done necessary so it can be taken off of Schedule I and put on Schedule II. But the DEA refuses to allow the studies to go forward. How do they do that? Well, it so happens that the only legal marijuana that's available for research in the United States is grown on a government pot farm in Mississippi. And if you can't get pot from that farm to do the research, you can't do the research. And the government is not allowed any research to be done so it can be put down to a Schedule II or Schedule III drug. So they say, it's like a catch-22 situation. Well, let's do it this way. Well, you've got to have research. But the research can't get done because the government won't let them do the research.
But within the confines of what's currently being presented to this council for consideration, there's three options. So within that backdrop, can you share with me what's going on in Palm Springs with the cultivation, the quality control measures, and as you shared with me, at least when you shared with the council and the members of the audience, anyone that can come in and, was it anyone can come in and purchase?
You have to be a member of the collective. In order to be a member of the collective, you have to meet certain requirements, and that, of course, is being a patient.
Okay. So any patient can come in and purchase?
Once you become a member of the collective, that's the way all collectives operate. You have to become a member of that collective. Once you're a member of that collective, then you can obtain marijuana that the collective grows through its other members. It's, ma'am, it sounds puzzling and it's crazy. It's just insane. I thought collectivism went on the ash can of history with the downfall of the Soviet Union, but somehow collectivism is resurrected in the state of California as a preferred means of people getting their medical marijuana. It's stupid. It's absurd. And so I'm trying to make a silk purse out of a sow's ear here to you, and it doesn't make any sense to you because, frankly, ma'am, it doesn't make any sense. We're trying to do the best we can with a rather bizarre situation.
All right. So therein lies perhaps my confusion, is if it doesn't make sense to you, then it's not
Does it make sense to you, ma'am?
It does not likely.
But we're
make
trying to
sense
do the
me.
best we can. And
Thank
the
you,
best
sir.
we can is to come up with ordinances to regulate these collectives. There are people like Joanne that want to do this work. It's got to be nonprofit. That's in the law. But people are dedicated to this cause. They really are. And we've got to set the laws up so they can do it safely.
The mayor has letting me know that I've exhausted my time, and so I
Thank you,
want
sir.
my colleagues to have an opportunity.
And we can
to
come back
speak.
to Mr. Sanders. Any other questions from the council? Comments? Mr. Edney?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This may be one of the most interesting issues that we've dealt with on this council. I suppose I came in here tonight, as you know, we've looked at this a couple of times, with a thought process of recommending staff move forward with item 2. The more I sat here and listened to the advocates, the more I caused reflection to ban it completely. And I say that with sincerity to the people who spoke, because I know you had your hearts into it, but I quite honestly think the more you spoke, the more damage you caused your case. First of all, I would suggest to you that I'm certainly concerned. Maybe some of you saw me ask for to see the speaker slips. Not one person spoke who lives in the Imperial Valley or who's been a long-term resident. Majority of it don't. Okay, sir.
I don't live in Riverside.
Sir. Okay. Sir, I'm not going to. I'm not asking questions.
I'm sorry, please. Please, I'm gonna ask if the council wishes to ask a question from the audience, they will do so, please.
I'll rephrase it and say that 90% of the people that spoke don't ever live in this county. That concerns me, because this is an issue.
Okay, please, I'm gonna ask the audience to withhold their comments, and I'll give you some opportunity when the time comes.
So, thank you, Mr. Mayor. What concerns me, of course, is that all of you are going to come into this city. One of you said, I suppose most of you are confused because you don't understand the medicinal purposes of marijuana. You know what that tells me? That you're not from this city, that you're not from this county, and you don't know this city council. So maybe you didn't do your homework. Because as Ms. Sanders correctly stated, I think most of us council members, regardless of what side we come out on this issue, understand that there are medicinal purposes to marijuana. I don't recall in the times we spoke that any council member has raised that concern that, oh, this is all a fallacy, that it doesn't mean anything. What I did notice, though, in the discussion points and the material that was provided, and this always concerns me as a council member, is not one of the advocates had one negative thing to say about a medical marijuana dispensary in the city. Not one of you. Well, you might have this issue, that has to be dealt with. Certainly there could be the concern that somebody's using it who shouldn't be using it. Certainly, while the objective is that there will be no increased criminal activity, we certainly can't say that. So when I sit here as a council member, I look for the facts.
You need to pay attention.
Okay, please, sir.
It was addressed.
Please.
Sir, I'm not going to argue with you.
Please. I'm going to ask the audience to please. We'll get some opportunity for input later.
But I continue,
allow the council member to finish, please.
Mr. Mayor, to prove my point, because I certainly, and I didn't think any of the council members interrupted any of the speakers, so I find it interesting that I have to be interrupted 4 times since I've been able to speak. Now, certainly this is not a slam dunk issue, and I spoke to this when the advocates were here a couple of months ago. Certainly there's a need. I'll agree with it. I think there are people in this community and in Imperial County that have medical issues that could be provided a benefit by having medical marijuana. I don't think anyone would necessarily disagree with that in a general sense. But also, as I said a couple of months ago, for us to sit here as a council member and say, there'll never be an issue, it's the most perfect thing in the world, I don't know that there's any issue that we deal with that is the perfect issue, that there's never a problem. That makes it the difficult thing. As one of my council colleagues suggested earlier, every city that I'm aware of in Imperial County has banned. And that concerns me. And ultimately, we come down to the question of this. Are we going to sit here and suggest that there's not marijuana illegally grown, sold, available in El Centro or Imperial County? I don't think any of us would agree that that's the case. My concern is if it's unregulated, we have no ability to control anything that goes on other than typical law enforcement action that I'm sure the chief and his officers deal with every day. I am concerned with the fact that whether it's one of the individuals in this room or it's someone who is not present, the inability of being able to be provided medical marijuana throughout Imperial County doesn't necessarily make sense to me too, because we have to look out for all our citizens. So as I started, I'm in a quandary. Quite honestly, the advocates I don't think did a great job of presenting their case, but I'm going to try to make their case and say that we are far better to direct staff under number 2 and craft an ordinance that makes the most sense, where we have the most control, where we can limit its location, its time, its availability within the confines of the law, than we are to, number 1, ban it. We just spoke about the Caltrans issue, and I would hope, however my council colleagues or the majority of this council feel, that number 3 would not be a very effective option, because that's doing exactly what we concern ourselves with all the time, which is just putting it off. We've had this before us for 6 months. We now know the decision that the voters had in November, which was one of the issues we raised back in October. As I'm sure our city attorney will tell us, the court cases on this could go on indefinitely for many years to come, because when a case is won or lost, somebody else will challenge it. So I would hope, however we go, that we look at items 1 or 2 and provide directive to staff so that we can move on to other issues. And it would be my recommendation that we strongly consider option 2, directing staff to move forward with presenting us back within 6 months a draft ordinance for review by this council.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Redney. And what I'll do as it relates to the public, if at the end of the council comments, if there's some factual information that you wish to address, and when one of you wants to do it and correct or provide us information, we'll allow it at the end. So please do not interrupt the speakers the council members as they provide their thoughts and input. So, Ms. Walker?
Well, I too, as Mr. Edney stated, came in very conflicted with regard to what action to take this evening. And I will tell you that with the exception of maybe 1 or 2 speakers tonight, nothing will raise my dander more than having out-of-towners come in here and tell me or tell this council what's right or what's best or what should be done for the city of El Centro. So quite frankly, with the exception of 1 or 2 speakers that I would actually consider to have any input of legitimacy to this issue, I think that several of you traveled here for no good reason.
Please.
I would also say that I have to keep in mind, what is the character of El Centro? What is the image that we want to project for our city? Those of you from out of town probably don't realize that we are actually a very, very conservative city. We're also a very compassionate community, and we come together at times of great difficulty and support one another.
So they can answer that phone.
No, I'm not going to stop so that they can answer the phone. They can turn off the phone, I would say. I've had personal experience with family, friends who have benefited greatly from the use of medicinal marijuana in a very compassionate end-of-life situation. So I do support that use in a very, very limited, highly regulated, highly controlled arena. I agree with Mr. Edney that I think that it's time for us to fish or cut bait with regard to this issue. I think the fact that we do have community members who have shared, maybe not this evening, but on previous council meetings, the benefits to their own family and the life-changing course that has touched them, leads me to conclude that we do need to consider our options to highly, highly regulate where and when. We have limited police resources for this issue. We have limited planning resources for this issue. Tightly controlled, very restricted for the express purpose that it was intended to do, which was to be regulated, to provide benefit to those people that need it.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. Mr. Solomon?
This was really unusual that I would fall back on this some years later. On April the 30th, 1974, the city manager here, I used to work for the city as an administrative assistant. The city manager here was Robert Nash, and he asked me to write a report on drugs here in the Imperial Valley, and I did. In May's issue of Western Cities, they had an article on medical marijuana dispensaries banned or regulated. So I went back to my old report, and what I liked about it, or what I want to share with you, is cost to the Sheriff Department. And then I want to talk about a Met facility that was in Calexico, and then wrap it all together from my point of view. On April the 30th, 1974, I turned in a report to the city manager, Robert Nash, on drugs in the Imperial Valley. I have a copy of that report, which I just showed you. And at the time of that report, I was, as I've said, administrative assistant. The information that I'm going to give you comes from the Imperial County Sheriff's Office of Narcotic Task Force. They had a report, and it was in 1973. That report talks about the number of people that were arrested, how much marijuana was seized, how much heroin was seized, coke was seized, and dangerous drugs. They arrested in 1973 213 people. The marijuana in pounds was 10,056. The heroin in ounces was 251. The coke in ounces was 18. The dangerous drugs was 197. The estimated street value in 1973 was $794. Wait a minute, $794,000. Now, from that $794,000, the Imperial County Sheriff Department, the Narcotic Task Force, and the cities in the Imperial Valley spent $2,384,000 to process people that were involved in criminal activities. Now, if we add all the cities into that, that was $202,338,000. That was 40% of all crimes committed in the Imperial Valley at that time were drug-related. If you add alcohol to that, it goes up to 80%. All the crimes in the Imperial Valley I'm sorry, 60% of all the crimes in the Imperial Valley were either drugs or alcohol. We spent close to $3 million. Now, there are some people that said that because of our proximity to Mexico, that was the reason why drugs were coming into the Imperial Valley. Others were saying at this particular time, 1973, that we had an excessive drug market here in the Imperial Valley. We had high unemployment, we had poverty, we had limited recreation facilities for youth. They said that all of these things contribute. Here we are over 30 years later, and my question is, are we any better off with the drug war in the Imperial Valley today than we were back in 1973? At the time of my report, we had a med facility opening in Calexico. This methadone facility was also supported by the city of Calexico that had given a certain amount of money to get this started. The lady that ran this facility, her name was Dr.
Casagenis.
Okay. And she had 10 clients when she opened this facility. Of those 10, 3 left within the first 3 months. On top of that, after there were some problems at this facility. The problems were after she counseled them, talked to them, got to know them, was giving them meds, she started giving them quantities to take home with them. After a while, they began to start selling it and turned around and started buying the harder stuff. Then a little bit after that, they had a break-in, and they stole the pills that she was giving. Bottom line is, we see that selling drugs as a criminal has some major consequences, but it also costs us an awful lot of money to take care of that money that we don't have today. Even when we have facilities that are working for people, we have some problems with those facilities. But I'm hoping that we have learned from our mistakes and can now do something a little bit better. Palm Springs might not be the movie star in the sky facility, but they have limited the number of facilities that they will have. They have 1 right now, I believe. The most that they will have is 3. They've also been able to say where those facilities are going to be located. Someone mentioned that earlier. They talked about the hours of operation. You can't be open from 1 o'clock in the morning till 5 o'clock in the morning. They talked about the rules for customers. They talked about the type of alarm system that you would have to cover. I think Mr. Edney said it, and I certainly agree with him on this. We on this council represent all the people, even those with pain. And even those with pain who do not want to break the law to get the medicine that they need to make their lives more comfortable. And because of that, with me, I agree. 2 is the best direction for us to go, because I think it allows our residents an opportunity to live out their lives with a quality of life that they would not be able to do if they're going over to San Diego for an hour drive, working on facilities over there. But I do agree with Mrs. Walker, that I am strictly a regulator. This thing has to be set up so tight that, it's hard for somebody to get anything out of it illegally. I'm going to leave it like that.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Personally, one of the things that I was hoping that we would do today, which it sounds like we are, is to make a final decision, either yay or nay. And if it's a yay, then let's move forward, provide staff with the input that they need to develop the ordinance that we will need to implement this. I've been I've listened to our local people. We listened to a lot of people from the outside today. There's never been a question for me on the medicinal value of marijuana, and that's the word that I'm used to saying, and I've heard that for 50 years. So I continue to use that, even though it may have a negative connotation from your perspective. I agree with it sounds like the majority of the council, at least, that we should allow dispensaries in the city of El Centro, that, however, they should be regulated. I'm not going to get into duplicating the comments, but our zoning, background check for applicants, all these things that would ensure that the right people use the medicine that are entitled to and needed for their health and well-being. That's basically, I'm not going to get any further than that. I think the sentiments as far as the council and how we look out for the community in general has been very well expressed. If there is one member of the audience that wishes to come forward and provide us factual information as it relates to the comments that were made, I'll just allow one person, please, and then we'll close it. Please, thanks.
I want to thank the council for this opportunity, and I want to apologize or clear the air because I think there's misunderstanding or miscommunication. Patients have come here tonight putting aside their ailments in struggle and in pain to represent and just put a personalized stamp on patients who are medical cannabis patients. We're not trying to be condescending or talk down to the council. We're just trying to share knowledge and information. To answer your question, Ms. Sanders, excuse me, I'm not a public speaker. I hate public speaking. There are 2 labs in LA County that currently provide testing for medical cannabis. It's able to provide feedback on the compounds that's in the medicine, and dispensaries are able to provide that information to their patients so that they can actually see what's in the medicine. It can be tested for molds and mildews. There's currently 2 labs in LA that currently provide that service. Also with the scheduling, currently cannabis is a Schedule 1 drug. I'm not a pharmacist, but cocaine is a Schedule 2 drug, and as a Schedule 2 or a Schedule 3 drug, doctors can offer quote-unquote prescriptions, but because cannabis is a Schedule 1 drug, they're only quote-unquote able to offer a recommendation. And my leaving statement I would want to say is that I know it's really tough to be a leader of the community. I know a lot of people look at you guys for guidance and leadership, and it's very difficult to do the right thing. But as an American citizen, I would like my leaders of my community to be just that, officials and leaders, and I would like my physicians to be my physicians. My physician has put his name on my recommendation. He will show up in a court of law on my behalf to explain my ailments in a court of law. And so that would be my final statement, is that I would like city officials to be city officials and leaders and respect those physicians who have put their name and their doctor's license on the line for their patients. So that's it.
Thank you very much. Additional comments from Councilor Ms. Sanders?
Yes. Thank you so much for those comments. While those answers were known by me, I wasn't sure if anybody else in the audience, and certainly the remaining members of this council, was aware. So you bringing it forth and illuminating, and I think gives us the tools that we need to direct staff so that we can understand more clearly what's at stake. Now, it's already been stated that some of you do not live in the city of El Centro. And I think it's understood that some of you do not live here. However, the policies that we're going to be making will affect the individuals that live here. So you're bringing that forward in the way that you did, certainly clarified it, because there's nothing we would want to do that would in any way jeopardize anyone's health. That's why I was asking about the quality control.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Anderson.
I just wanted to say that,
well, we'll talk after. We'll talk after. We'll talk after the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Edney.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion that the council direct staff to review and consider options for the regulation of a medical marijuana dispensary, that the council appoint a task force of 2 members to work with the legal department and the planning department to help draft that ordinance, and that it be brought back to the first meeting in June 2011.
There's a motion on the floor. Any additional
Second.
discussion or dispense second? Any additional comments? Please ballot. Motion by Edney, second by Solomon.
Motion carried 5-0.
Thank you. We are going to take a break.
Okay, Mr. City Manager.
Yeah, there is a second item that you need to take action, and that is to adopt the interim ordinance to extend the moratorium through April 21st, 2011. Under state law, as I've explained many times, the council can only adopt an initial 45-day moratorium, and then you can adopt up to an additional 10 months and 15 days, which would give you 1 year, but you can't extend beyond that. At the end of that 1 year period, you can then again extend the interim ordinance for another 1 year period. So my recommendation is to
I'll make that motion.
adopt the ordinance.
To make sure that the audience understands, that's for the purposes of allowing staff the time to develop the ordinance and come back to council as recommended by Mr. Edney in June. So is there a motion to that effect?
I move.
Motion by Edney, second by Solomon. Please ballot. Before we break.
It's ordinance number 10 dash.
So that will be
15.
115?
No, 15.
50?
15.
5
1 5.
50?
1 5.
15. Okay. All right. Okay. Very well. Are we clear?
Can I read it?
Everybody ballot?
Motion carried 5-0.
Yes, we will talk about that after break. What do you want to do right now? Wrap it up. You mean that point?
I don't know if we had the ability to do that. It's not agendized.
Good.
Can we appoint the task force members this evening or no?
Well, yes, if you want to appoint the task force, that certainly would be part of the agenda item.
Okay.
Okay. Is there council members that wish to volunteer? Ms. Walker?
I'd like to work on it.
Well, we can only do 2.
Oh, there's 2.
Mr. Edney wishes to also.
All right, well then, have at it.
Okay. So Mr. Edney and Ms. Walker have been appointed to a task force to work with staff on the development of the ordinance. We're going to take before the audience leave, we're going to take a short break. One of the informational items that we have actually is going to require a staff report. That's the issue dealing with the library. Before we break, we want to congratulate Mr. Solomon on his birthday.
Yay, happy birthday.
And so with that, we will take a 5-minute recess, please. All right, let's resume the meeting, please. Okay, thank you. We don't have any additional action items, but within the informational items that we have, staff wanted to give us give us a report on item number 11, which has to do with our library and issues that have surfaced. So, Mr. Duran.
Yes. While there is a task force that has been addressing earthquake damaged buildings, has been part of an ongoing discussion and, quite frankly, sometimes going down dead-end trails of resolving these earthquake damaged facilities. The library is one that's become extremely problematic. And I've asked for this to go as informational, but also to present it to you so you can hear it and start processing the information we've received and what the task force has received, so that, well, you get an idea of our frustration of where we may be going on this. So with that, I think Mr. John Gay will speak, and then we'll also have our library director and also our Christy back. She was here, I thought, for a second. She may speak to that also concerning the grants that we're looking at. Mr. Gay?
We did meet with FEMA after the earthquake event, and we worked up what the damage assessment would be, and as part of that process, they allowed us to hire a structural engineer to go in and do a better assessment. There were areas we couldn't get to after the event occurred. And so over time, we were able to do a very complete assessment of the library. And so what we asked the structural engineer to do was look specifically at areas that were damaged by the earthquake, as well as look at possible long-term solutions for the structure. And so basically, in a nutshell, what we found was that there's roughly $250,000 worth of damage. There's a bearing column that's in the basement that needs to be retrofitted, as well as there's some damage on the east wall of the facility that has exhibited some buckling. So what FEMA most likely will authorize will be repairing just that specific earthquake damage. The $250,000. Correct. The structural engineer went on to say basically that there were multiple expansions to this library facility over its life. I think the original structure was built, and Roland, you may have to help me, in the early teens.
1910.
And then there were multiple expansions beyond that. But the real issue at hand is that during the first major expansion, they removed the west wall of the original facility, which created a very large open bay. And the shaking that occurred was primarily east-west with this seismic event. And there was better shear in that direction to hold that facility in place. What the engineer indicated after looking at this structure, he was concerned that if we received shaking in a north-south direction because of the large expansive areas and because we removed the original wall in the facility without retrofitting that, there's a risk that structure could fail. And so that started a discussion internally about what we could do in order to try and bring that facility back into current code. And if you look at the report that Terry authored, it gets fairly expensive. And so we're looking at abatement issues because of the old library. It had lead as well as most likely asbestos. They would have to abate before we even retrofitted that structure, and then also the cost of retrofitting. So, we're probably into a $3 million retrofit, if not higher, just to try and bring that structure into current code. So that's basically where we're at from an engineering end. And there's been further discussion about where to go from here.
Now, if I could continue, Mr. Hayden.
Can you show me where the $3 million figure is, Mr. Day? I mean,
I think if you look at Terry's report, it's a huge report, but look at
I think
attachment 8. Attachment 8.
Ms. Walker, I think he's talking about the 2.157 on the back plus the 800,000 abatement.
We would have what the numbers that are shown on attachment 8, they're for structural, architectural, mechanical, and electrical. It doesn't discuss any kind of abatement, doesn't discuss, there's construction management in there, but there's unknown costs that we have there. This is really just kind of a real quick assessment on what the cost would be. And so I would anticipate that we'd have higher costs because of the abatement and demolition as well.
Ms. Walker and Council, Terry is not able to be here. When we started in this process, we saw the 247,000, and quite frankly, we said we can do this. We can search through our funds. We strip us pretty hard, but we can do this. And we asked the Brady and Associates to give us an idea of the engineering costs, construction management, how we can do this, and they came back, and their letter, which is in here, and I'm sorry I can't seem to pull it at the moment. is that they would be willing to do this project, to do the design, two critical stipulations. One is that they be indemnified by the city for the life of the building, and secondly, that they would not seal or sign their plans. Because without a complete remediation of the building, and this includes pillars, I think it's every 24 inches around the building to re-support the building, because what we have now is we're opening up a building, and that requires that we meet the new codes. And that's why we get to the $3 million. We have to meet the new codes. If we put this wall in, well, then we also have to do everything else that's not there that makes this building meet new code, which includes all the old building portion, which is brick, has to be reinforced with columns. And that's where this
even structure that was not damaged by the earthquake would have to be retrofitted?
Correct. In order, let me respond back to Mrs. Walker's question, because the other cost that and I'm not sure if it's mentioned in here, but we had to go through. We were on the verge of moving forward before the earthquake to fix the restrooms and the electrical in the library. And I think maybe, I don't know, Marcelo, was that? It was ADA compliance, but was it? There was, I think, it was 800,000. I think that's what that was. So that it brings it up, but.
Have we gotten a second opinion with regard to this?
We haven't. No, we can.
Independently reviewed this report.
Staff has reviewed what Brady and Associates have given us. We can actually go out and get a second opinion. That's something we can do. I mean, it's my opinion that an engineer is going to look at this, and they're probably going to give you the same information.
Okay, then maybe, I appreciate that. Then maybe what I need to hear, maybe what we need to hear is, what's the game plan?
Okay, and what's driving this is a discussion about, will an engineer sign the plans? And I want to give you the next step. If we are unable to receive signed plans to do the remodeling, our building official under statute cannot give us a permit, which cannot give us insurance. So okay.
But she wants to know.
What is the game plan? Because let me tell you, we've waited a really long time. In a community where literacy is as challenged as it is, in a community where we have lots of families whose only access to books, computers, magazines, newspapers was our public library. This is a critical component of what we need to be providing to our community. And the little community center library over there, no, it's not cutting it. Absolutely not cutting it. When we tried to do our children's program in there this summer, packed to the rafters with kids that wanted to participate. And I know personally tons of folks, myself included, who haven't been to the library since the earthquake because of the restrictions. I mean, the small number of books that are available, the small confines. So I'm really frustrated, and I'm channeling a lot of frustration that I get from people in the community. So I guess I want to hear, what's the game plan? When I read this report, I thought, okay, kind of sounds like this consultant and our staff has bought into the thought that we are not going to be able to reopen our library. So what's the plan?
We can reopen it if we had the money, but we unfortunately, Ms. Walker, as a member of the task force, there is limited resources that we have available, number one. Number two, if the particular engineer and staff has said they concur with the engineer's observation, will not sign off on it, that puts us in a dilemma. The interim period, obviously, is the community center. I agree with you, that is not a best solution. The other alternative is to look, and I don't see Ms. Reister here, she was at our meeting. She gave us an indication that there may be some funds, and I want to underscore the word maybe, some funds available whereby a certain space over at the MLK Pavilion could possibly be used at the library, but we're looking at, that's a 2-year, that's 2 years.
That's not going to cut it.
Well, in the meantime, there are some empty buildings, and someone would like to rent us these buildings at a pretty substantial fee. But if you have some ideas that you would like Mr. Solomon and I to take back and work through with staff, we'd be more than happy to try to incorporate them.
Now, if I may have Mr. Banks come up, we have short-term, the longer term. Again, that's why I wanted this presentation, so you would hear where our frustration, because we had a plan and that went awry, and we can back up and look at those out of engineering again, but we're not confident we're going to get a different outcome on this. Mr. Banks will talk about the short-term operations.
And we'll come back to this after Mr. Banks, but what have we identified as funding sources? I mean, put aside any pie-in-the-sky grants or anything else. We've got $453,000 in library impact fees. How much of that can be spent towards construction costs versus anything else? We have the $800,000. Is that still available through the CDBG funding if we were to reprogram that to the library?
It's redevelopment funds that we have used some for design because we were getting ready to go out to bid when the earthquake came. So there is about a little over $700,000.
Okay, so $700,000 there. Perhaps some were part of this $450,000 here in impact fees. So we're at, 1.1 million, folks. What can we get for that?
Actually, your impact fees may, we'd have to evaluate because if that can be used, we'd have to, but the point is we would have to go out and make sure that those impact fees, remember impact fees are capacity issues and not maintenance issues. So we would, but the point, we understand what you're talking about is that 1.4 million, we started looking at what are we trying to fix or what are you trying, and this is the direction we're working with. Are we trying to fix this? Are we trying to arrive back at the library we had before? And what will we have at the end of an estimated $2 million? Now, we can go out to bid and ask people, what will it take to get this to code? And we can go through that process. But I think we need some indication from the council is, if you will, are you prepared to strip all the other funds that we have available for the library in this process? Or do we want to try for this for a grant or alternative funding? Because it would take everything you had. Mr. Banks?
Not to have a fully functioning library, I think, is dreadful commentary on how we are addressing the needs and quality of life issues here.
Okay. Mr. Banks? Well, let's hear from Mr. Banks.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor.
One of the things that we have decided to do with the library board is they have met and read this report and they have talked about it and their recommendations and where they want to go. And of course, they feel like you do, Mrs. Walker. They're not satisfied that we can wait, but trying to find any options. The first option that they said would be that we stay where we're at, even though it's limited. We have figured out a way that we can make available the collection, even though on about a 24-hour basis, if somebody has something that they need or they want, we can retrieve it and bring it back to them. Obviously, that doesn't give them a chance to just browse through the library if they want to. We have been able to keep up in the interim with the major bestsellers, and they are available, and we have just this last month went through and reshuffled some of those and put so that we could have the newest materials available. We're working with the Recreation Department to see if we can expand that area and give us more space so that we can at least bring back some of our children's activities. We can't do anything, but
we're... Our homework center, our after-school homework center and computers, how many computers do you have up and running?
We have 8 computers. They're not all, the problem right now that we're having with the computers is that they're not all able to print. We only have 1 computer that will print, and so we have to get the others up, and that's a problem with IT staff and working to get those up to standard, but we do have 8. We have the children coming in after the school. They are coming in and using the computers. The program that we have for our after school is available to students that have computers at home so that they can access it Even they don't have to come to the library, but it's available to them. We're full every day. Library, the computers are used from 9 o'clock in the morning till we close at 6. And there's somebody there on them at all the times. So we are using it. More and more people have been able to find out where we're at. And I think with that, saying that we talked about going to the old post office, looked at that very closely, looked at the structure of the building and how it was, and felt that it was not feasible for a library.
Okay, so the library board, Mr. Banks, is wanting to stay where they're at the community center. Look at possible expansion and opportunities there. And then what? And
still looking for something else if we can get it. We did look at, we looked at finding another building to rent, and they would have charged us $21,000 a month to rent the space that we needed. And we, of course, that's out of the ballpark for us.
What size space are you anticipating for an interim building?
Well, that was figuring a space of 14,000 square feet, which was what we have now. So if there's something available larger and that we could expand to, we're looking.
So you need to have Wi-Fi, you need to be able to wire it so that you
Right.
can use your computers.
Yes.
Need staffing considerations, so a little bit of tenant improvements and then lots of space for books.
Yes.
Okay.
And we're looking at all of those options. The option that Christy's not here, but I can talk a little bit about that. There is through Parks and Recreation possibility of getting a grant and moving the library to the Martin Luther King facility. There's a building that's on the plans there that they already have that was going to be used for recreation that we could take over and use as a library.
How many years from now, though?
Well, that's 2 years. That's down the road. And unfortunately, even if we went to work today, we're frustrated.
Thank you, Mr. Banks. Sanders, you have a comment?
I'm not sure what more I could add, Mr. Mayor, because the staff is providing us this very bleak picture, and it's an unfortunate set of circumstances that we find ourselves in. I can assure the council, however, that the task force has looked at all of the various options. We lamented every single thing that is currently being expressed here today. But I would like to have Mrs. Salcido come forward and share with us on these impact fees. And if the city manager is correct on those impact fees, some of that money may have some restrictions on our ability to actually capture and utilize it for the library construction and or reconstruction.
Right, as Ms. Walker mentioned, we have approximately $400,000 in impact fees for the library. However, there are restrictions. Those funds cannot be used to remodel. It can only be used to expand for increased capacity. That's the whole point of the impact fee. So we will need to determine if we were holding a 14,000 square feet building. And we were to build a 20,000, then the difference between the 14 and the 20 would qualify for impact fees.
But our capacity right now is about 3,000 square feet. So if we were to use the funds to go into a larger facility, we no longer have 14,000 square feet. We no longer have that.
Okay, what can we do with the existing building? Notwithstanding getting a second opinion, that's what's being questioned, whether or not a second opinion would be valid. Is it worth going out and looking at someone else saying that they are willing to sign this fact that this will be a safe building for us to house children and any other user of the library, in its current location? Therein lies our dilemma. And Ms. Walker, I can assure you, if you would have seen Mr. Solomon and I during that meeting, we lamented every single thing. We asked staff for every option that could be available. Mr. Banks sat there and we wiggled every direction we possibly could to look at some other way to move this forward on a fast track. I don't know.
I'm not hearing that, Ms. Sanders.
Well, I know.
What I'm hearing is one option that the library is no longer available unless we want to spend bazillions of dollars.
Okay.
Then there was an option offered at $21,000 a month that was not an option. An option to go out for a grant, pie in the sky, maybe someday, a couple of years from now. In my mind, those aren't solutions.
Okay, but short of that, Mr. Solomon and I need the three of you to help us, guide us through a process that you think will meet the needs of this community, and what avenue do you think we need to pursue in order to get that accomplished?
Mr. Redney?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The notice for the council is attachment 7, and it's the second page, item number 3 that Mr. Duran was referring to earlier, in which the engineer suggests that number 1, they would be asked to be indemnified, and number 2, that they would not sign off. So,
thank you.
In case you hadn't had a chance to see
well,
that. 2, with a real estate and construction background, I have no problem with us going and getting someone to review this and offer an alternative. But the reality of us spending $3 million or plus on a building that old, to me, doesn't make great sense for the long-term solution. I think we need to look at alternatives, whether it's at the MLK complex or elsewhere. You look at the cost, you look at the needs for technology and other things. To put that much money in a building that old with that many problems, quite honestly, I don't think is going to serve the interest of the public. So I think we need to look at that option as we go through. As far as the interim solution, I think Ms. Walker makes a point. If 3,000 square feet is not enough, then we need to look at a temporary solution over the next 24 to 36 months as to how we can get that. Now, 3,000 is not enough. We had 14. We may have to settle somewhere in between, as opposed to getting the full 14, because obviously the costs are going to be extensive. So I think we need to identify, and I would ask Ms. Piedra, we have received allowances under the CDBG money in the past, especially in light of the earthquake. Would it be possible to use any of the CDBG money, the $800,000, for the use of renting a facility, since this community is a disadvantage and because we have no access to an appropriate sized library?
Well, you have the two possible funding. You still have the redevelopment bond money that's available. And that was going to be used for the rehab of the ADA compliance. And then CDBG, we would have to see if that's eligible.
Well, I would say that could be the interim step, and then we could look for a building. We don't want to be spending $21,000 for the next 2 years a month, because you're going to wipe out $500,000 or more dollars, which could go towards building new. That said, doesn't mean that we could find an alternative situation which would maybe spend $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 a month leasing space, which would cost us a couple $100,000 a year, but over 2 years or 3 years would cost us less and would get us in a space much larger and appropriate for conducting the types of programs that we need to do. Ms. Piedra, you are aware of a building that I showed you that would likely be able to be worked out when you had your issue at the RDA that had 6,000 square feet in it, and likely some very appropriate deal could be worked out with the owner of that property, who it's vacant, it's not being used, they're receiving no revenue, they would want to engage with the community, I think, in this assistance matter, as we talked about during your RDA flood issues.
Modular building, and then relocate the modular over to Martin Luther King if and when that space becomes available.
You're identifying good options. I think if you look at that report, they break down the areas of retrofit.
Right.
And so the higher areas are the older areas. So if you're going to try and salvage any portion of that building, I would get rid of, I think it was A and B. You'd want to get rid of the older area, because you've got, maybe not half, but a third of that library that you could possibly salvage. That's one option. But I think we need to discuss, just what options you're actually
And
looking
if that
for.
approach is taken, as we, as a task force, listen to some of the staff reports, then we worry with the asbestos and all of the other things that are in there. So those concepts have to be taken care of,
Yeah, I
in
think-
consideration as well. And the retrofit part, whether we're going to use the old facility or a new facility, that retrofit and the cost of retrofit can be, knowing that we need all that technological opportunities available in the facility. So this building that's out there somewhere for us to use, this 21, what did you say, Mr. Edney? How many?
6,000.
6,000 square feet, the retrofit to make it accommodating for the technology that we would like to do that.
Well,
But these are things I appreciate,
Here's what I think
Mr.
we
Mayor,
need to
but-
do is we need to come back maybe at the first meeting in February with a short-term plan to Mrs. Walker's concern. What options, cost, available funding do we have to solve the interim plan? And I think it's important that we develop an interim plan quickly to solve it the short term, because we got to separate the two issues. I'm not against your idea of can we save a part of that, but if you try to save a part of it, you still have a significant amount of money just in the demolition of that other 2/3 because of the asbestos and the lead-based paint in there. So to me, that's more the longer term. How do we get a larger library facility open? I don't know what size it is. That would be the task force or city staff working with Marcella and Mr. Banks to figure out how can we fund a tripling of the size, a doubling of the size, a more significant location for the next 24 to 36 months. Then start a separate task of, okay, now what is the long-term solution while we're waiting for the...
Let me suggest, I think that staff is clear that the level of importance and the level of dissatisfaction with the existing format is clear. And so I'd like to suggest for staff to come back as early as possible and bring it back to the task force and the library board, but come up with an interim recommendation as soon as feasible.
Part of that steps is we'll have a second opinion on the engineering issue, because we saw that just threw us off our tracks because we were all set to go on this. Secondly, I will follow up with that rental, because the first ones we looked at were much higher. Mr. Edney, any assistance you can provide us with that would be appreciated. And bringing back an interim program. The longer-term program of rebuilding that building or going somewhere else is going to be much longer, because we don't have the capacity to borrow money, and we don't have the money, and that's been our frustration. We can get something that can rent that would be significantly larger, that give us a second site. That would give us some relief, but when we looked at, and we give you the example of the OPOP, we went through several iterations of how to make that work. It doesn't work. We actually have to bring in new buildings in the back. It just doesn't work. So that's why we headed the direction of it. We will back up and hit this again.
Okay, well, let me propose something else as well. City of El Centro owns that secondary site next to the outpatient center, right? What would it cost for us to put a modular building right next to 4th and Main Street and open up a branch library there? I mean, I think, folks, we've got the creativity. We can identify the funding sources. We certainly own property here within the City of El Centro that can accommodate an expansion of the library. We just need to make it a priority and come up with a plan. If we don't have a plan, we're not going to get anywhere.
I don't disagree with Ms. Walker, but I just based on experience, I would tell you that it's certainly likely we could rent a 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 square foot facility less expensive than bringing in a modular.
Well, I don't care.
So what I'm saying is, I think what we could do is we could ask that staff review the funding options, work with CDBG, and see if we can get an exception to use some of that CDBG money to pay for rent because of the situation we're in, which would identify the source to pay for the interim.
Figure out how many RDA funds are left, and figure out what options we have with the $453,000 in impact fees.
Well, what we've got to do is come up with an estimated cost of what it's going to cost on a monthly basis for 24 months to operate a alternative site library. Exactly. And come that back. I would hope that, Mr. Mayor, that staff could come back at the first meeting in February with a plan of attack or some options to present to the council. Would that be
Is that reasonable, feasible?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, council member reports. Mr. Edney, anything else? Any reports?
I think I'm tired. Thank
Okay.
you.
Ms. Walker?
There is a planning meeting that's going to occur with El Centro Regional Medical Center Board of Trustees, and we're anticipating inviting city council members to that, I believe. It's to look at the options available to the hospital now that the admin building was severely damaged in the earthquake, so there's some, what we call this silver lining, a redo, if you will, of opportunities for the hospital as to what they do with that secondary site adjacent to the campus. So I don't have the date on that. Luis, Mr. Hernandez, do you recall?
Well, I believe the last one I saw was the second Tuesday in January, which would conflict with the Planning Commission
So
meeting.
anyway, the preview
That
of coming
was-
attractions, we'll get that date pushed out to you as soon as
Ms.
possible.
Walker, a question before you move on.
Yep.
Where are you with the proposals on the clinic site?
We gave it's gone out for request for proposals. I believe that all of the proposals were supposed to be back in December
3rd, I thought.
December 3rd, and then we've pulled together a selection committee of both internal and external consultants to evaluate the proposals and award the bid.
Are you doing that in December meeting?
December.
So you'd be able to prepare back at maybe our January meeting with where they're going with that?
Absolutely.
Okay. Anything else, Ms. Walker? Okay. Mr. Solomon?
Two things. First of all, for those who missed out on the Southwest Performing, Southwest High School had a young lady from Mexico City. Pretty was supposed to be pretty well known, and she just came in and floored the place. I mean, Mara Silva was there, and she just did her job. Even though I don't understand Spanish, I was rocking with the whole thing, the whole night. It was just outstanding. She had a way about her with the audience that was really nice. She had everybody clapping, and she just did an outstanding job. And the other thing I wanted to mention was that I want to thank the rec department for the float that we had for the Christmas parade that Mr. Silver and I were on. I was just showing Mrs. Sanders a picture of my 7-month-old grandson with my 17, almost 18-year-old granddaughter. We also rode on the float and had a nice time. It was good to have the three of us participating in that. And it turned out well. It was a great Christmas parade.
Thank you, Mr. Solomon. Ms. Sanders?
Yes, Mr. Mayor, I just wish to thank the council for the opportunity to attend the National League of Cities meeting in Denver, Colorado. It was cold. I will be bringing a follow-up report, a little bit more detailed report, but I am happy to give information as to the second vice president for the National League of Cities, someone that Mr. Duran knows all too well, is Marie Lopez Rogers. She's the mayor of Avondale. And if you remember, Mr. Duran came from Avondale before coming into California. So, and the next year's NLC meeting will be in Phoenix. So I trust that we'll all be able to go. The resolution, I have the book resolutions if we would like to look through them. The thrust of all of the resolutions had to do with immigration. We are liking to see the federal legislators work diligently on that effort. The second piece, and there were several resolutions through each one of those various committees, was finance reform, which is what we're doing here in California. And the third piece was please do not do anything to take any more monies away from CDBG funding. But I will give a more detailed report at our next meeting.
Thank you, Ms. Sanders. I'll make my report fast, but I have to say, the last couple of weeks have been fun. Being the mayor of El Centro, the Christmas parade was really a lot of fun, well attended. The city's float received one of the trophies. I forget what category, but it's an award-winning float. I had a lot of fun with my granddaughter and Mr. Solomon there. I don't know how many people were there, but it seemed like there was more than I've seen before.
6,000.
is from the moment we made our left turn on Main Street all the way to Buckland Park, it was just a wall of people. Mr. Solomon is right. The city, as I had mentioned before here, was a sponsor of the mariachi concert at Southwest High School. It was really a magical night in terms of the music. Attendance was well attended. It wasn't full to capacity, but it was, I estimate, around 800 people. So at Southwest High School, that's a pretty good showing. In spite of the publicity, in spite of the radio, television, a lot of people said to me that they didn't know about it, but they certainly are putting it in the calendar for next year. It was not a good weekend to have it for some people, and if we're able to switch that around a little bit and do it again next year, I think that we're going to get a full house at Southwest High School. And it was truly, for those of you that were there, it was truly an incredible night. I think the council received a letter from the feds in regards to SkyWest being selected as our air provider for the next year. And trust that you see that. Ms. Walker, when she was mayor, she talked a couple of times about a task force to look at the city treasurer reformatting of that, and I believe staff needs action on the formation of that task force for our January meeting. So I don't know if there are volunteers that want to take that on, or if we discuss that in. That's that in a formal action,
We'll do that
Luis?
in January. Yeah, it is considered action, so you probably want to agendize
we'll schedule that for the January meeting. And maybe not council related, but it's definitely community related. I want to give you a save a date for April 8th for, among other things, with the IVROP Community Foundation, our major fundraiser for the year, which is our Dancing with the Stars Gala, is scheduled for April the 8th. So it's us also.
John Edney is going to participate.
No, not this year, but he's on top of our list for next year. But Chief McGinley is going to participate. He's going to be one of our judges. So again, it was a lot of fun. It's been a lot of fun. I thank the council for appointing me as your mayor, and look forward to a very productive year. So with that, we will adjourn the council meeting and re-adjourn as the redevelopment agency. The only item on the agenda is the approval of minutes for November 2nd and November 16th. Motion by Edney.
Second.
Second by Sanders. Please ballot.
Broken.
I'm
Okay,
sorry.
we'll just vote.
Ready to go home.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay,
I am
are we
so
done?
sorry.
That's okay.